I'm just going to give a very short sort of introduction to the Wireless House. It's been, as many of you know who are Glebites, who live in the community, this has been quite a long time coming. It's been quite a long, slow, and not particularly painful process, but just a rather long and drawn out and very, very detailed. As you'll know that before the park was rehabilitated, thank you very much. That's much better. The Wireless House was in a bit of a state of disrepair and had been kind of used as a gardener's shed for a long time. Just to recap for those of you who don't know anything about it, it was originally built in 1934 and equipped with a radio from Grace Brothers that was now Broadway Shopping Centre in early 1935. And it was a very unique piece of social provision by the local council to provide a kind of entertainment place, a meeting place for the many kind of local unemployed working class people of Glebe. It was not a very wealthy suburb. No one could afford radios, and so people would come to this park and listen to the radio, and it was operating from 10 in the morning till 10:15 at night, every night. Its main competitors were the church and the TAB. They complained, they thought it was stealing their business, which it possibly was. They complained bitterly to the council and tried to have it closed down. They lobbied the council. The council was steadfast for very, very many years. And it eventually succumbed to these kind of complaints that it was creating kind of an idle class, as it were, the idle working class, not the idle rich. And when we first started doing our research, we thought it closed down in the 50s, but some of our oral history interviews indicated that it actually used to play Beatles music and talked about the American War in Vietnam. So we're not quite sure, but it must have rolled into the 60s at a lower volume, but we've never been able to kind of nail that one conclusively. When I first took the project on, my first meeting with the city landscape architects showed this park with its sort of renovations. The one thing I couldn't see in the drawings was this building. So I said, where's the Wireless House? And they said, oh, well, that's going. And I said, well, what do you mean it's going? I'm supposed to be working with it. And they said, oh, you can work with the base. You can work with the concrete base. And there followed several months of argument and further research, which actually did confirm that this was possibly the only building of its kind ever built in Australia. And I actually have never been able to find an example of it anywhere else in the world. So we can feel confident that the Wireless House in Glebe is at least the only one of its kind in Australia. It may well be the only one of its kind in the world. It's a kind of very, very unique sort of, as I say, it's form of social provision. So after much kind of bantering and argument and a lot of help from various people in the community, this has been kind of listed as a historic building, and in fact some time ago won an additional heritage award even before the project was started. So the kind of the idea of resounding the house was seen to be a very important and valuable thing to do. The two kind of main prongs in terms of the audio content was to establish a working relationship with the National Film and Sound Archive and work with their audio curators to make a fairly broad selection of radio from the 30s, 40s and 50s, because at that time we thought it probably closed in the 50s. They were incredibly helpful, although it's still a very long, slow process and involved a lot of copyright negotiations and things like that. But the other very, I think, really important thing was the development of an oral history program within the community, which was sort of spearheaded by Julia Burns over here, who did a fantastic job, and also in parallel to that, a kind of provision of training, technology training within the community to help people record their own stories, edit them, and push them through to the the actually three websites that are actually related to the house is the Glebe website, the Wireless House website on Poole, and the one we built in the city. So content flows from those the community base up through those websites and into the database of the Wireless House itself. The other element in the house is Phil's going to talk about it a bit later, so I'll mention it, but I won't talk about it. Is the fact that there's an internet hub in the house which makes the park wireless. It's a kind of pun, but the park in itself is a wireless space, so people can come here with their mobile devices, laptops, computers, and phones, and connect and surf the web, and they can even look at the Wireless House websites, of course. What else should I say? The other person who did an incredible amount of work on the house is John Drummond, he's having his kid's face painted. He's over there in the black hat. John did work with me on the technical scoping of the house and putting the technical system together and writing the software that when you walk up to the house, you can see these little motion sensors around the house. The system then goes to find a file at random from the database and plays it. And there've been a few system bugs, and we've slowly kind of worked through that. Not the least of which has been a kind of very dodgy power supply to the park, which keeps falling over. But I think we've nailed it now. The system hasn't been crashing for quite a while, so it's a challenge, and you have to rise to them. So I think we've got it in the end. So it's up, it's running. The last thing I forgot to mention, the shields around these stainless steel kind of shields around the house. They're graphically based on the radiation patterns of antennas. So these various loops and whirls that you see in there are actually taken from the way radio waves form around radio antennas. So it's very directly linked to the idea of the house itself.